For 20 years, my heart beat in time with the school bell. It was my metronome, the rhythm of my life. 7 a.m., the first bell, a call to arms, a signal to prepare the sanctuary. 8:15 a.m., the tardy bell, the last stragglers rushing in, faces flushed with the morning chill. 3:30 p.m., the final bell, a wave of joyful chaos as they poured out, leaving behind a silence filled with the ghosts of their laughter. My name is Eleanor Vance, though for 2 decades, I was simply Miss Eleanor. That wasn't just a job title, it was the entirety of my identity. I was the second-grade teacher at Northwood Elementary, a red brick building that held more of my life than my own small apartment ever did. I didn't have children of my own, a choice, or perhaps a circumstance, that became solidified over years of pouring my maternal instincts into a river of other people's children. I arrived an hour before anyone else, just to have a quiet moment with the room. I'd smell the chalk dust, the faint scent of crayon wax and disinfectant, and feel a sense of peace. This was my kingdom. The posters on the wall, the tiny desks arranged in neat little pods, the reading nook I'd built with my own hands from salvaged wood and pillows I'd sewn myself. It was all a testament to a love affair with potential, with the bright, curious minds of 7-year-olds. I didn't just teach them reading and arithmetic. I taught them how to tie their shoes, how to say sorry, how to share the last cookie. I wiped their noses, bandaged their scraped knees, and hugged them when their puppy died. I stayed late for parent-teacher conferences that stretched for hours, listening to the worries of mothers and fathers who saw their own hopes mirrored in their children's eyes. I spent my own money on art supplies, on books for the classroom library, on snacks for the kids who I knew came to school hungry. The school fundraisers? I was the one baking 3 dozen cupcakes, manning the booth for hours, and being the first to bid on the lopsided pottery made by a first grader. I was part of the fabric of Northwood. The janitor, Mr. Henderson, and I had a silent pact. He'd leave me a fresh pot of coffee, and I'd leave him one of my famous lemon poppy seed muffins. I saw principals come and go, new teaching methods rise and fall like the tide, but I remained. I was the constant. The children I taught grew up, went to college, got married. Sometimes they'd come back to visit, towering over me, their own children hiding shyly behind their legs. Miss Eleanor, they'd say, a nostalgic smile on their faces. Do you remember me? And I always did. I remembered their favorite book, their struggle with long division, the name of their hamster. Because they weren't just students. They were mine. Each one of them took a little piece of my heart with them when they moved on to the 3rd grade, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. Then came Founders Day. It was the school's 50th anniversary, a huge, sprawling event planned for months. It was meant to be a celebration of the community, a day of funfair games, food trucks, and a big ceremony in the auditorium. I was, of course, heavily involved. I organized the 2nd grade's History of Northwood mural, spending weeks with the kids, their hands sticky with paint and glue, their imaginations running wild. On the day of the event, the sun was bright, the air filled with the smell of popcorn and freshly cut grass. I felt a buzz of excitement, the same kind a mother feels on her child's birthday. I had dressed up, wearing a new floral dress I'd saved for the occasion. I walked towards the main gate, the same gate I had walked through 10,000 times before, a smile on my face, ready to celebrate the place that was my life's work. But this time something was different. There were tables set up at the entrance, manned by a few of the more exclusive members of the PDA, women I'd always found a bit cold, who treated the school more like a country club than a place of learning. One of them, a woman named Brenda, whose son had been in my class 2 years prior, held up a hand to stop me. She had a clipboard and an unervingly bright smile. "Name?" she asked, not looking up. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Brenda, it's me. Eleanor." She finally looked at me, her smile faltering for a second. "Oh, Miss Vance."
E.
Her eyes scanned the clipboard. "I don't see your name on the family check-in list." I was confused. "The family check-in? I'm here for Founders Day, just like everyone." I gestured to the crowds of people streaming past us. She gave a little, tight laugh. "Well, yes, but today is a bit special. We're tracking family attendance for the new donor plaque. It's for students and their parents. A family day." Her words felt like small, sharp pebbles being thrown at me. But
I'm faculty.
I've worked here for 20 years. I helped organize half of this. I tried to keep my voice light, but a knot of dread was forming in my stomach. Her smile was gone now, replaced by a mask of polite condescension. She leaned in, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. Look, Eleanor, the new principal, Mrs. Albright, she's very specific about the optics. This is a celebration of the Northwood families, the people who build the community. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. That I, who had dedicated my entire adult life to this place, was not truly part of its community. The final blow came not from Brenda, but from Mrs. Albright herself, who had glided over, sensing a problem. She was a sleek, corporate-looking woman who I never felt truly understood the soul of our little school. "Is there an issue here?" she asked, her eyes flicking over me dismissively. Brenda explained the situation in a hushed tone. Mrs. Albright listened, then turned to me, her expression one of mild annoyance. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice crisp and final. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but today, this space is for the children and their families. We need to be clear about that. The event is only for real parents." The words didn't just sting, they shattered something deep inside me. Real parents. As if my love was fake. As if the 20 years of my life I had poured into her students were a counterfeit currency. I looked past her, through the gate, and saw my mural, my kids' colorful handprints all over it. I saw children I had taught, now with their own families, laughing and eating ice cream. I saw Mr. Henderson waving at someone. My world. And I was being told, in no uncertain terms, that I did not belong. The humiliation was a physical force, a hot wave that washed over my face and down my chest. People were starting to stare. I could feel their eyes on me, the whispers starting to ripple through the line. The woman who wasn't a real parent. I just nodded. I couldn't form a word. I turned around and walked away from the gate, from the music, from the laughter, from my life. Each step on that pavement felt like a betrayal. Not their betrayal of me, but mine of myself, for believing that my dedication was the same as belonging. In that moment, my ground disappeared. It was the deepest pain I have ever felt. If you have ever experienced a great disappointment and understand what it is to have your heart broken, please like this video so that I know that I am not alone in this journey. The days that followed were a blur of gray. The vibrant colors of my classroom world were replaced by the monochrome palette of my small apartment. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. No children's laughter, no morning announcements, no ringing bell to structure my day. I had resigned the following Monday. I couldn't face them. I couldn't walk back into that building and pretend that my heart hadn't been carved out in front of the whole community. I sent a simple, formal letter. No one called to ask why. I received my final paycheck in the mail, along with a generic form letter thanking me for my service. 20 years, summarized by a laser-printed signature. My life, as I knew it, was over. I was untethered, a ship without an anchor, drifting in a sea of purposelessness. I'd wake up in the morning and for a split second, I'd think about what I was going to wear to school, what lesson I had planned. Then the reality would crash down on me, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Who was I if not Miss Eleanor? I had no hobbies to speak of. My hobby was my students. My friends were mostly other teachers, and seeing them felt like picking at a wound. I isolated myself. My savings, which had never been substantial on a teacher's salary, began to dwindle at an alarming rate. I started eating canned soup and toast, turning the heat down to save on the bill. The woman who once nurtured hundreds of children couldn't find the energy to properly care for herself. I spent my days staring out the window, watching other people live their lives. I saw mothers pushing strollers, fathers teaching their kids to ride a bike. Every happy family felt like a personal indictment. Real parents. The words echoed in the silence, a constant, cruel reminder of what I wasn't. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. This was the bottom. A dark, lonely pit of despair with no light and no footholds. One afternoon, drowning in self-pity and facing a utility bill I wasn't sure I could pay, I decided I had to do something. I started cleaning, a desperate attempt to exert some control over my chaotic inner world. I went through old boxes in the back of my closet, things I hadn't touched in years, planning to sell whatever I could. Tucked away under a pile of old college textbooks, I found a heavy, dark wood chest. It had belonged to my grandmother, a a quiet, wise woman who had practically raised me. I ran my fingers over the worn carvings. I hadn't opened it since she passed away more than a decade ago. The key was still on a small ribbon tied to the handle. With a click, the old lock opened. The smell that wafted out was a ghost from my childhood. Dried lavender, chamomile, and something earthy, like soil after the rain. Inside, it wasn't filled with jewelry or old photographs. It was filled with dozens of small, leather-bound journals. Her handwriting, a delicate, spidery script, filled every page. Beside the journals were neatly tied bundles of dried herbs and flowers and small, labeled glass jars containing salves and oils. My grandmother had been a healer of sorts, not in a mystical way, but in a practical, ancient one. She believed that everything you needed to soothe the body and soul could be found in the earth. People in our small town used to come to her for everything from a colicky baby to a nasty burn. She'd listen patiently, then go to her garden or her pantry, and come back with a remedy. I sat on the floor and began to read. The journals were a lifetime of knowledge. Recipes for balms, infusions, poultices. Notes on the properties of different plants. But it was more than that. It was her philosophy. She wrote about nurturing, about the patience it takes to grow a plant, to dry it, to gently coax its healing properties out. She wrote, "Caring is not about grand gestures. It is about 1,000 small, patient acts of kindness. It is about seeing a need and quietly, humbly, trying to fill it." Reading her words, I felt the first flicker of something other than pain in a long time. It wasn't a thunderbolt of inspiration. It was a tiny, fragile spark in the vast darkness. Here was a different kind of nurturing. Not in a classroom, not for a crowd, but quiet, personal, and profound. It was a legacy of care passed down to me, a form of parenting that had nothing to do with biology or school registration lists. I held one of the small jars of calendula salve up to the light. It was still good, still fragrant. I thought of all the scraped knees I had bandaged with cheap, store-bought antiseptic. I thought of the care my grandmother had put into this little jar. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a failed teacher. I felt like a granddaughter. And I felt a faint, whisper-thin thread of curiosity pulling me forward. That tiny spark became my lifeline. I didn't have a grand plan. I just had my grandmother's chest and an ocean of time. I started by reading every single journal, page by page. I took her dried herbs and, using her notes, I learned to identify them by sight and smell. The calming scent of lavender, the bright, apple-like fragrance of chamomile, the deep, resinous aroma of frankincense. My tiny kitchen, once a place of lonely meals, transformed into a laboratory. The air, which had been stale with sadness, now carried the scent of simmering herbs and beeswax. It was hard, incredibly hard. My first few attempts at recreating her recipes were disasters. I burned the oils. I added too much beeswax, creating salves as hard as rocks. I misread a recipe and made a concoction that smelled absolutely foul. There were moments of deep frustration where I'd sit at my kitchen table, head in my hands, surrounded by failed experiments, and the voice of doubt would whisper, "Who are you kidding? You're a teacher, not an apothecary." But then I would read my grandmother's words again. "Patience," she wrote. "The plant does not hurry, yet it blooms." So I persevered. I treated it like a lesson plan. I bought fresh ingredients from the farmer's market, spending the last of my savings. I studied, I experimented, I failed, and I tried again. I learned the precise temperature to melt beeswax, the exact moment to infuse the herbs into the oil to capture their essence. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to get it right. I created a small batch of the calendula salve for burns and scrapes, a lavender balm for sleep, a peppermint and eucalyptus rub for sore muscles. Each little jar I filled felt like a small victory against the darkness. It was more than just mixing ingredients. I was pouring my focus, my care, my own bruised and healing heart into each one. The first time I shared it with anyone was almost by accident. My neighbor, Maria, had a little boy, Leo, who suffered from terrible eczema. His skin was a patchwork of red, itchy, painful rashes. She had tried every cream, every steroid, every doctor's recommendation, with little success. One evening, I heard him crying through the thin apartment walls, a sound of pure misery. My heart ached for him, for her. The next morning, With my heart pounding, I knocked on her door. I held out a small, unlabeled jar of a special balm I had created based on my grandmother's notes for irritated skin, using chickweed and calendula. I don't know if this will work, I stammered. My grandmother used to make it. It's all natural. Please, just try a little patch on his arm. Maria was so desperate she would have tried anything. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a familiar parental exhaustion I'd seen so many times before, and nodded. 2 days later, she was at my door again, tears streaming down her face. But this time, they were tears of joy. She grabbed my hand and pulled me into her apartment. She showed me Leo's arm. The angry red rash was gone, replaced by smooth, calm skin. He slept through the night for the first time in months, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Eleanor, what is this? It's a miracle. Seeing the relief on her face, seeing Leo playing happily without scratching, that was the first real ray of sunshine that had pierced my gloom in almost a year. It was a feeling I recognized, the deep, profound satisfaction of having helped a child. It wasn't in a classroom, and it wasn't for a paycheck. It was just a simple, human act of care. That was my first real victory. Maria told another mom. That mom told her sister. Word began to spread through the neighborhood, a quiet ripple effect. You have to talk to Eleanor, they'd say. The woman in 3B, with the healing hands. People started coming to me, not just for eczema, but for dry skin, for stress, for a baby's diaper rash. I never diagnosed or prescribed. I wasn't a doctor. I simply shared what my grandmother had taught me. I'd listen to their stories, their worries, and I'd offer them a little jar of something made with patience and care. I started a small stall at the weekend farmer's market. My table was simple, just a few jars and a handwritten sign, Grandmother's Garden. At first, people walked by, skeptical. But then my neighbors would stop, sing my praises, and soon I had a small, steady stream of customers. They were drawn in not just by the products, but by the story. They wanted to hear about my grandmother. They wanted to feel that connection to something simple, real, and honest. I was no longer the lonely, jobless woman in apartment 3B. I was becoming someone new, someone who could create comfort and healing with her own 2 hands. It was there, with my own hands, that I began to rewrite my story. I stopped being the victim and became the author of my destiny. If my journey of overcoming is inspiring you, subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters and become part of this community of new beginnings. Life found a new rhythm, one dictated not by bells, but by the seasons of the earth. The business, Grandmother's Garden, grew steadily, organically, like the plants I now cultivated on my balcony. My small farmer's market stall became a permanent fixture, a hub of community. People didn't just come to buy salves and balms. They came to talk, to share their troubles, to find a moment of peace. I hired Maria to help me manage the stall and online orders, her gratitude having blossomed into a deep friendship. My apartment was no longer big enough, so I rented a small workshop space, a bright, airy room that I filled with drying herbs, workbenches, and the constant, gentle hum of a small batch mixer. I was happy. It was a quiet, sturdy happiness, built on a foundation of my own making. I wasn't rich, but my bills were paid. I wasn't famous, but I was respected. I had found a new kind of family, a community woven together by threads of shared vulnerability and healing. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the past came calling. An email landed in my inbox. The sender was Northwood Elementary. My heart did a strange, painful lurch, a muscle memory of a phantom limb. The email was from Mrs. Albright. It was cloyingly cheerful, full of corporate jargon about community outreach and synergistic partnerships. She said she had been hearing wonderful things about my new venture and was so impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit. She wanted to know if I would be willing to meet with her to discuss a mutually beneficial opportunity. I stared at the screen for a long time. The old Eleanor would have been a wreck of anxiety. The new Eleanor felt a strange, detached calm. I knew what this was. They wanted something. The school was holding its annual fundraising gala, a much fancier affair than the folksy Founders' Day. They were soliciting donations for the silent auction. My products, which had become a beloved local brand, would be a desirable item. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The woman who wasn't family enough to attend a school fair was now being courted as a community partner. I agreed to the meeting. Not out of anger or a desire for revenge, but out of a need for closure. I needed to walk back into that building, not as the broken teacher who was cast out, but as the woman I had become. I chose my outfit carefully. Simple, professional, comfortable in my own skin. I walked through the main doors of Northwood, a place I hadn't set foot in for 3 years. It looked smaller than I remembered. The hallways were the same, the faint smell of floor wax and children was the same, but I was different. I was no longer defined by these walls. Mrs. Albright's office was sleek and impersonal. She greeted me with that same bright, artificial smile, offering me coffee, making small talk about the weather. I just sat calm and quiet and waited. Finally, she got to the point. She gushed about the success of grandmother's garden, how it was a testament to the Northwood spirit. Then came the pitch. Would I be willing to donate a premium gift basket for the gala's silent auction? It would be, she assured me, great exposure for my brand. I let her finish. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then I looked her directly in the eye. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. Her smile froze. I'm sorry. No, I won't be donating. She was flustered. But it's for the children. And it's great marketing. Mrs. Albright, I said, my voice still even. The last time I was here, you stood at the gate and told me that this event was only for real parents. You made it very clear that after 20 years of service, I was not considered part of the Northwood family. You broke my heart that day. You broke it in a way I thought was irreparable. She started to stammer, to offer excuses about policies and misunderstandings. I held up a hand. Please don't. It's not about revenge. I am truly not angry anymore. In fact, in a way, I am grateful. Because when you closed that gate to me, you forced me to find a new path. You forced me to find a different way to care for people. My grandmother taught me that true healing is quiet, humble, and honest. It's about seeing a person's pain and offering them comfort without a label or a ticket for admission. I stood up, my purse in my hand. The products I make are an extension of that philosophy. They are for everyone who needs them. But my support, my partnership, that I reserve for communities that understand that family isn't about blood or paperwork. It's about love, dedication, and respect. I wish you the best with your fundraiser. I turned and walked out of her office, out of the school, and back into the sunlight. There was no triumphant music, no cheering crowd. There was just the quiet, profound satisfaction of having spoken my truth, of having honored the broken woman I once was, and celebrating the strong woman I had become. Today, my life is full. My little workshop has become my sanctuary. The rhythmic chopping of herbs, the scent of melting beeswax, the quiet chatter of the small team I now employ. This is my new symphony. My hands are not soft. They are the hands of a maker, often stained with chlorophyll or smelling of rosemary. And I have never been more proud of them. My legacy isn't written on a blackboard or measured in test scores. It's found in the small amber jars that sit on nightstands and in medicine cabinets across the city. It's in the letter from a young mother whose baby can finally sleep through the night, free from the torment of diaper rash. It's in the email from a chemotherapy patient who says my simple, unscented balm is the only thing that soothes her ravaged skin. It's in the smile of an elderly man at the market who tells me my muscle rub has helped him tend his own garden again. I realized that Mrs. Albright was right about one thing. I'm not a real parent in the way she understands it. My love was never meant to be confined to one classroom or one set of children. My purpose is bigger than that. It is to nurture, to soothe, to offer a small moment of comfort in a world that can be so harsh. The pain of that day at the school gate never completely vanished. It's a fine, silver scar on my soul, but it no longer hurts to the touch. It is a reminder. It taught me that sometimes the most profound betrayals are not endings, but violent, unwanted beginnings. They can burn your world to the ground, but from those ashes, if you are patient and brave and willing to dig deep, something new and beautiful can grow. Today, I understand that the wounds of the past don't define who we are, but what we do with them does. I am immensely grateful that you have listened to my story this far. If it has touched you, share it with someone who needs a light and leave a comment with a word of strength and hope. Together, we are stronger.